Hello and welcome to the fourth and final of our recordings, which lead up to the ECIS conference, which is between the 27th and 29th of April later this year. The focus of the conference will be looking at school culture. And over the last couple of weeks, Helen and I have been looking at this and discussing various elements. So Helen, over to you. What's the fourth question in relation to this?
Okay, our fourth question is, can a school culture be measured?
Okay, so last time we talked about the ways in which the school can influence the culture. Many people would argue, I think, that one of the things which has driven down education is the fact that we need to measure everything. And actually, I quite like the description that Tony Little, who was the headmaster of Eton, once gave, which was that actually the most important things can often not be measured, which may lead you to understand where I'm heading with this. I don't think you can specifically measure a culture. If you remember one of the earlier recordings when we discussed what is a culture, even the definition, there's no agreement on this. So I don't think it is something that you can specifically measure, but I think you can gain a greater understanding of a culture. And I think you can begin to look at the impact of, but as always, even down to with student learning, there are so many variables that go into it. It's very difficult to specifically point to one thing and say, you know, we were 4.7, we're now 5.1. Isn't that wonderful? I think one of the things, again, is to look at the kind of culture that you want. And in those initial discussions, to look at possibly some of the metrics you might look at. When we started looking at culture here at Deira International School, one of the things that we said is that if we have this common culture, people understand it, I think a logical consequence of that is that staff will be happier here, feel more contented. And the way in which we can measure that is to look at staff retention. Now, I work in a school in Dubai. There are 1,001 reasons why people might wish to stay and go. Therefore, it's a very blunt tool. But I think you can look at certain elements and have a look at the way in which they're being influenced. So that would be my first answer to the question.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about kind of, you know, important things not being able to be measured. And I think for me, when we think about culture, it's something we want to develop and nurture, perhaps rather than something we want to get a tape measure to and, you know, give the 4.7 to 4.9 measurement. I also think there's a great book, I don't know if you've come across it, called The Tyranny of Metrics by Jerry Muller. And he talks a lot about how we live in a culture of performativity, and often that causes people to distort the metrics. So they measure inputs rather than perhaps outputs, and, you know, maybe think about, well, we spent lots of time on culture, so it must be great.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things when we think about measuring anything is we need to handle that with real care.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things you can do is audit where you are and sort of look at statements, value statements, and say, you know, I don't know, we have a strong collaboration between staff. It's that, you know, strongly believe, etc. And I think you can begin to have an understanding. And I think also that you can track that over time. But, you know, I suppose I'm going to do that really annoying thing of when you say, throw it back to the question, what do you mean by measuring? I mean, ultimately, this has to be for student success. Everything that we do in the school is looking at ultimately student outcomes. But again, how do you measure that? But I mean, I think this is one of the things that's really interesting. And there are a whole variety of different views on this. And it's something that, you know, something I know that at the ECIS conference is that we're going to really sort of begin to delve down into a little bit. So, I mean, I think one of the hopes is that people who've watched these videos have gone away and had a think about it. And what would be great is if people come to this with a variety of different answers and their experiences. If you take the sort of the premises upon which these conversations have been based, have you got a culture? Well, yes, I guarantee that. Are you aware of it? Possibly. Are you trying to influence it? If so, how? Have you thought about measuring it? If the conference delegates can have a think about that in advance, I would personally love to know what they think, because I think what is perfectly clear is not one of us is sitting here with the book of answers, but I think we all agree that it's such a powerful force for school improvement that ultimately will help the students. We really want to engage in a very deep discussion on this so that we can all learn from each other's experiences. So really looking forward to seeing everyone at the conference, and really, really looking forward to what I know will be very powerful conversations that we can all learn from.